Tate's tomb is the only private burial ground in Clackmannanshire, but it's listed on the historic Kirkyards trail, which runs from Logie Kirk near Stirling to Muckert. The burial ground was once horseshoe-shaped, and the River Devon passed by it. However, with the coming of the Devon Valley Railway in 1869, it was diverted away from its original course to allow for its construction. This left the burial ground in a marshy field, so the wall was then filled in to prevent vandalism, and now the only access is via a beautifully ornate metal gate on its north side. John Tate, writer to the Signet in Edinburgh, bought the Harveston estate, which at the time was named Easter Tillycutry, around 1776. He died in 1800, aged 67, and was buried in the newly formed graveyard. Following his death, his only son, Crawford Tate, born 1765, inherited the estate. He and his wife, Susan Campbell, whom he'd married on 16th June 1795, had a large family of 7 boys and 3 girls. He died on 2nd May 1832, and at the time was in financial difficulties. He was buried beside his wife, who'd predeceased him in 1814. A headstone was later erected by 3 of their grandsons. Tate's younger son, Archibald, went on to become the Archbishop of Canterbury, but on his death he wasn't brought back to Scotland, instead being buried at St Mary's the Blessed Virgin churchyard in Addington, Croydon in London, where he died on Sunday 3rd December 1882. There are memorials to him in Canterbury Cathedral, where a marble tomb was erected, and at Balliol College in Oxford, where he'd once studied. There is also a bust of him in Westminster Abbey. Other members of the family buried at Tate's tomb include John Tate, eldest son of Crawford Tate, born in February 1796, who became an advocate and sheriff of Clackmannan and Kinross, serving in this role for over 35 years. He was also Sheriff of Perth for a time. He died on 22nd May 1877. His wife, Mary Amelia Sitwell, who died in 1845, and 4 of his children are also buried there. His sisters, Susan, Charlotte and Mary Ann, and his brother James are all mentioned on a headstone, but not all of them are interred at the site. When the Harveston estate was sold to Sir Andrew Orr in 1859, it was sold on the proviso the family retained Tate's tomb, which they did. In 1862, it was consecrated by Archibald Tate, who was then the Archbishop of London, with permission by the Bishop of the Episcopal Church in Edinburgh. His wife, Catherine Spooner, and son, the Reverend Crawford Tate, who'd both died in 1878, are mentioned on a headstone. Also buried there is Colonel Thomas Forsyth Tate, another son of Crawford Tate and Susan Campbell. Born in August 1805, he died in 1859. But one of the most intriguing headstones belongs to 2 women who weren't family members. Betty Morton and Mary Russell worked for the family. They were described as faithful nurses and servants in the family of Crawford Tate. Both had been in the service of the family for many years, with Betty serving 30 years and Mary 50, and when they died, they were buried in the family burial ground. A headstone was erected by the family in 1877, Such was the high regard in which they'd been held. Tate's tomb is closed to the public, but is open on special occasions, such as Doors Open Days. The tomb is associated with ghostly sightings, especially, it's said, at Halloween. Halloween or All Hallows Eve, the day before All Saints' Day, Hallow being an old word for saint, has been observed in Scotland since ancient times. Its origins can be traced to an old Celtic festival called Samhain, which was celebrated by the Druids on 1st November as a culmination of the end of summer, the harvest and start of winter. The November festival also marked the Celtic New Year. Regarded as the Feast of the Dead, Samhain commemorated those who'd passed and ridiculed death to keep it at bay, as they believed the ghosts of the dead walked among them on 31st October. Traditionally associated with ghosts, the sighting of an apparition near Tate's tomb has intrigued for generations. During the long winter nights, people passing the tomb have often seen a man wearing odd clothing, who on approach seems to disappear. There does seem to be some credibility to this ghostly spectre, as during World War I, a bus driver making his way past the tomb stopped to pick up a passenger. What struck him was his strange outfit, but he dismissed it as he pulled up. The gentleman got on the bus and sat down. There was no conductress on this particular occasion, so the driver started the engine and looked in his mirror to check on his passenger, but couldn't see him. He turned round, but the bus was empty. He checked outside, but the road was deserted, the only noise coming from an owl hidden somewhere in the trees. Quickly he drove to Dollar and the safety of the lamplights. Mystery surrounded the events of that night, as some years before, Crawford Tate's son, Archibald Tate, the Archbishop of Canterbury, died in December 1882, allegedly in debt. So the legend had it, his body was transported at night. It was said an estate worker waited at the tomb for his arrival. However, as previously mentioned, he was actually buried in Croydon. Does the estate worker still await the body? Or is it Crawford Tate, who died in 1832, and who frequently walked this road during his lifetime? Is it another member of the family? Or is it something else entirely? We may never know. Over the years, there have been many recorded sightings of the ghosts at Tate's tomb. At the time of our visit, the south-facing wall was broken and it was possible to get into the burial site, but we chose not to, as we feel it would be entirely wrong. We have too much respect for the dead, so left them in peace. If you enjoyed this episode of Scotland's History, please like, comment and subscribe. Until next time, thank you for watching.